Connecticut East this week is supported by CT Examiner, a multi-award-winning online newspaper covering stories from across the state, from politics to business, health, education, and the arts. For just a $20 annual subscription, CT Examiner will let you know what's happening where you live. ctexaminer.com, reporting and supporting what matters. And SCAD, the Southeastern Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, providing recovery services since 1966. We believe in second chances and in the strength of every individual to recover. Now in our 60th year, we remain dedicated to growth and innovation. To get involved, visit scad.org to learn more. Connecticut has been the backdrop for many TV series and movies over the years. And starting soon, several towns across the state will serve as filming locations for a new thriller miniseries by Connecticut native and filmmaker Joe Hawk. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Connecticut has been used over the years for TV and film location shooting, and if you're a fan of the Hallmark Christmas movies, you know exactly what we mean. But starting soon, Connecticut native and filmmaker-writer Joe Hawk will be using several towns and locations in the state for his new 8-part thriller miniseries, and I sat down with him recently to talk about the project and why he's using Connecticut as the backdrop, even though his series is set elsewhere in the nation. Joe, thanks for joining us on Connecticut East this week.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for having me here, and I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to talk about my new project we're kicking off.
Tell us more about it, because you reached out to me, and I love getting emails, and you're going, hey, I want to talk about this project I'm doing, and I'm closing down some streets actually up in the Quiet Corner. So it's a mini-series, a thriller, I believe?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's considered a political thriller. The title is The White House is Fake. When I say that, a lot of people cringe, mumble and grumbling that and I know, your listeners know. That title, it's quite a mouthful because people are divided on political type things and religion, but it has nothing to do with a person. It's basically about a teenager. His name's Nelson Conrad, and he discovers something under a highway. The story takes place in Alexandria, Virginia. And it's really just a political thriller about secret tunnels and the kid, Nelson. He saw something he shouldn't have seen, and the U.S. government isn't happy. And to your question before, we're starting in October in Ansonia, Connecticut. We're going down a manhole like the Ninja Turtles, literally filming in a tunnel system from the 1850s. They actually would carry Civil War ammunition through these tunnels. So there's a lot of history. I'm using it because the aesthetics. It's beautiful. It's those old masonry walls. And if you look up, we're talking about 16 feet high, a tunnel system that extends across many different towns. And then beyond that, the Quiet Corner, as you mentioned it, there's not a whole lot of stuff that goes on there. So I'm trying to really expand my horizons. We're going to Putnam, Connecticut on November 1. We're closing the streets because the story takes place in the 90s. I can't have modern cars in the backdrop if I had an open set. So I'm closing the set just for that sole purpose, is where I can control the environment, and I'm going to bring cars from the 1990 era to be parked on the streets as background cars, and that's why we're closing the roads.
A lot of work goes into this. We're going to explore, obviously, this a little bit more, because people have to realize that, as you just said, when you're doing things at certain points in a time frame, you have to make sure that you've got the right stuff, because boy, oh boy, there's people out there who will get in contact with you afterwards and go, that wasn't the right thing that was actually supposed to be around at that time. But you're all over the place with this miniseries. I believe it's an 8-episode miniseries. It says here, apart from Putnam, you're going to be in Tolland, Wethersfield, Farmington, Norwalk, even as far as New Mexico as well. I mean, this is a big production.
Absolutely. I'm a very creative person, so I gravitate towards the location and how it paints a picture in my mind. So we go to the locations that make the most sense for the creative process, right? So we were in pre-production. For those who don't know the term pre-production, that basically happens before you film. A lot goes on to it. You got your casting, you got your props, you got location scouting. So we were in pre-production sometime in June, maybe July of this year. That's really narrowing down the void on the location, seeing the locations, picking the cast, getting the props, get in a timetable, get in the casting call schedules together. But yeah, like you said, we're all over the place from Farmington to Talent to New Mexico. And the reason is that these locations really tell a story. So like the New Mexico one, it's actually at a underground military installation that we're using as another segue into part of the tunnel system. The Farmington Library in Connecticut, we're using for a very dramatic scene where Mr. James Hutchison, he's a city official who confronts the kid, Nelson Conrad, and really grills him about, hey, what did you see? Who are you? Why are you asking all these questions? And that's a really dramatic scene that's going to take place. So we're really excited to get going on this.
Now, I need to ask you, you are a writer. You are credited, obviously, as the writer for this. Is
That's
there
right.
any elements of like reality in this? And the reason that I ask is because I looked up the storyline for this, a very cheeky, sneaky storyline says in 1957, Dwight Eisenhower started the biggest political secret. Now, if anybody knows their history, President Eisenhower wasn't necessarily responsible for any one particular secret, but there was a lot of stuff around him in that type of year. So are you drawing on some like historical reality?
You might be onto something. So in 2017, I actually wrote a book called The White House is Fake. This is based on my book. There's some different stuff I added just for character development, and the story kind of goes a little bit different and a little bit more in the miniseries. But yeah, in 1957, Dwight Eisenhower, for those who follow history, he actually started the Interstate Highway Act in 1956, 1957. And my fiction kind of gets tied around that, where, in my own words, I say he started the Presidential Protection Act. That's not a real thing. I made it up, but basically it supersedes the Designated Survivor Act of 1947. This fiction supersedes that, where in the Interstate Highway Act, for those who remember, it was actually based on the military. They wanted this for the military, but they changed it and said, hey, where the heck's the public going to go, right? So we need to make this for the public. But I actually said to myself, I was driving down the interstate, I could be onto something here. What about if they're taking over 37 years from, 1957 to about 1992, 1993? It took them 37 years to build these highways. So at the same time, why not build secret tunnels at the same time? So I kind of thought, and I wrote my fiction around that. So that's kind of how it developed. And it just kind of happened. And it's quite the tagline, though, around the 1957 era, where the presidential cabinet after Dwight Eisenhower follows the Presidential Protection Act, and it's really designated to protect the president. This is where you're going to get confused. But the U.S. president, the one we voted for, well, he's fake. The fake U.S. president, he's real. So it gets a little confusing. This is how I describe in the story. It's about puppets, and making decisions is not based upon who you think it is, because it all revolves around the Presidential Protection Act. I'm not going to really say any more of what that is, but that's kind of how I spin it.
How long did it take you to write? Because, like we said, it's an
Yeah,
8 episode mini series. Obviously, there's
correct.
lots of elements to it. So, give us some idea as to how long it took you to write this.
It's a little bit challenging because the story right now exists as a book. I wrote a novel about this, so I have to transpose where I want to show in the book into these episodes. And you ever watch a TV series where, it just ends in a way where you're like, your mouth just drops. You're like, whoa, what's going to happen next? That's how I end each episode. So there's going to be a mouth dropping moment at the end of episode 1, episode 2, so on and so forth, that it really just reels you in. So I really had to separate where I wanted to go with the story. Okay, this episode 1 focuses on Nelson Conrad, who he is. He's looking for the biggest adventure. Well, he found it, let me tell you that. And then it kind of ends where he meets Mr. Hutchison. And episode 2 it focuses in around James Hutchison, what the kid knows. He's kind of lying about what he knows. So he's kind of poking his nose where he shouldn't be going. And then James Hutchison kind of reels the kid back in, and just really finding the balance of the suspense, the intensity of these two characters. It's just going to be one hell of a roller coaster. I can't wait for you guys to see this. And that was just my creative process is really just developing more characters. I'm developing more backstory of the Conrads. Like his parents were a little bit in the book, but I really developed them more in the miniseries because they kind of help Nelson out. It really talks about who he is as a teenager. So I think that's really helpful in the creative process, is really developing the characters more.
Now, you mentioned at the top of the interview the pivotal character is in Alexandria, Virginia. Why didn't you choose to do filming down there? Because, I mean, it's great that obviously the filming's happening up here in
Yeah.
Connecticut and various other locations, but give us some insight as to why, as a director, so like you picked certain places.
And that's a great question. For me, Connecticut itself is just such a beautiful overlooked state for filming. We've been passed over and passed over many times again. And if you look at Virginia, there's different types of locations there, but Connecticut and Virginia, some of the trees and foliage is very comparable. As a writer and director and producer of this, when I look at certain scenes, like the highway scene, is when he sees the military men come out of the secret tunnel on the highway. Nelson Conrad sees this. I had the perfect location. I knew I had to go to Wethersfield, Connecticut, and that's really kind of how I kind of wrote myself back into Connecticut, because when I write, I see visually where this is going to happen, what location we were going to go, and not only that is as I have such a strong support system in here in Connecticut, many resources, many great people. I've already talked to 3, maybe 4 mayors in Connecticut, and they're all for this, right? I talked to the mayor of West Haven, the mayor of Ansonia. I just talked to the mayor of Putnam. His name is Barney. I actually had lunch with him a few weeks ago, and they're very supportive of this. And I think it's important that growing up in Connecticut that you really go back to your roots. And that was important to me, that was to stay in Connecticut, because there's so much roots, there's so much history, there's so much of Connecticut that people don't really realize. And not only that is in one of the school scenes, I'm going back to my high school, Watertown High School, Watertown, Connecticut. That's where I'm from. I talked to them. I talked to the principal. I talked to the superintendent. We're doing a lot of the high school scenes right in Watertown, Connecticut. And again, that's back to my roots. That's why it really felt important to stay in Connecticut.
Doing something like any type of movie and location filming,
Yeah.
as we've said at the top of this, it takes a lot. And one of the things that we mentioned was that you're going to have a road closed down because obviously you need to have the specific period vehicles there.
Yeah.
How difficult is it actually to get those type of permissions? Because I'm guessing that as
Yeah.
much as people want to help with filming, it's disruptive.
You really hit the nail on the head. It's really tough. My last film, Article 92, that's on Amazon Prime. The reason I bring it up is that in that film, we literally closed the roads in Bristol, Connecticut. We flipped a car on its roof. And the insurance policy on that is actually wasn't that so bad. But the reason I bring that up is fast forward today, the White House is fake. And the town of Putnam was very challenging because we're talking about local roads and a state road. State Route 44 is owned by the state of Connecticut. So I had to get extra approval for that. So not only did I get the local approval from the chief of police, who was all totally on board, but then I had to work with the DOT level. And that was really, really hard because the red tape for that, the insurance policy was more strict than when I flipped a car. I just needed, general liability, that type of thing. Now, when I close the roads, they want a $5 million umbrella. So I had to beef up my insurance policy all the way up to $5 million. Now, typically umbrellas policies we keep around 1 million, but they wanted a 5 million. Just, we're not doing a stunt, we're not flipping a car. That's what they want. So that's what we had to give them. So it took maybe a month or so to go through all the red tape. We had to fill out a permit application. We had to send them our insurance policies, and we beefed up to 5 million umbrella, sent them all that. And then it went through the approval process and it got approved. So we had to wait, but that's why it's very important that when you do pre-production, you're months behind the actual dates you want to film because of things like that.
And not only that, as you said, of course, these things are costly. Nothing is cheap, especially when you're like making movies, whether they're small or big, because obviously everything that's involved from the equipment to people. Who's funding this? Where'd you get the funding for this?
So my company is Hawk Studios, thehawkstudios.com, and we're an independent film company. So we do have various executive producers and associate producers that help with the funding. William Petrano, he's with Westerly Productions. He's one of my partners in this. So this is being presented by Hawk Studios and Westerly Productions, basically with a bottom line, because we're just procuring different costumes, right? We had to make a chief of police costume for Alexandria, Virginia. I have a contact at Smith & Warren. Smith & Warren, for those that don't know, is what the police department uses for the badges. So I had to get a replica police badge that says City of Alexandria, Chief of Police, got his uniform, I got his patches sewn on. So there's a lot of costume making, procurement of that. Nelson Conrad, this is in the 90s, so there's no smart watches, right? So we have a Casio watch. So he's using a Casio watch when he checks his time from the period of the 90s and things like that. So there's a lot of props as far as art design, getting certain cars, and obviously just filming. I mean, we're only filming episode 1 and 2 this year, but that's still a lot of work. Basically, do just episode 1 and 2, and then 3 through the rest of them will be done later in 2026. Our focus is only on the first 2 episodes right now.
Just quickly getting back to obviously the cost factor, something as innocuous as well as I'm guessing a license plate for a car, because obviously you don't want Connecticut's like license plates
Yes.
showing up in the
You hit the
filming.
nail on the head. I have Virginia license plates from the 90 years that we're going to be putting on the vehicles. So all of that's very important because as you're watching this in the background, you notice those things. So that's exactly why we have the Virginia license plates for that reason.
Now, this isn't due out, I believe, until towards the end of 2026. So we've got some time before we see
Yes.
the end result. I believe that possibly one streaming service that this may be available on is one called Tubi. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is considered a SAG micro project, meaning we could have SAG union actors and some non-union actors, and we have to follow the SAG guidelines. And with the SAG guidelines for SAG micro, it says that we can't do SVOD. SVOD is subscription video on demand. That's like Amazon Prime, so it will not be on anything that you need a subscription for. Instead, SAG micro says we have to put it on AVOD, advertised video on demand. Essentially, it could be any free type of services you could stream, or particularly we're looking at Tubi. So our thought is right before we film the rest of the episodes, sometime January, February, you should see episode 1 and 2 on Tubi. So those will be out. People will be enjoying those while we film the rest of the episodes. That's how we're going to release them. We're going to release them in parts. And then later in the year, the rest of the episodes will follow suit and they'll come out on Tubi. But we want to get people roped in. We want to get people excited. So we're going to actually get those first 2 episodes on Tubi first. Now, before that happens, we're going to have a big public premiere. So if you're from Connecticut, you're from New York, we're going to do 2 premieres sometime early January. Public's welcome. And think about this. How often does this happen? Sit with the actors. The actors will be there. Public is invited. You can get a ticket. You can go to the theaters. We haven't locked in the venues yet, but there'll be one premiere in Connecticut, one in New York, probably Staten Island, New York. And when those dates are sought out, we will let people know when that is. You could find more information when that happens at thehawkstudios.com. But that's what we plan to do. A big red carpet, Tubi release, film the rest, and then release the rest. That's kind of how we're thinking right now.
Just quickly going back, you mentioned SAG, and just for the listeners, the Screen Actors Guild, in case people are just wondering, we always like to, sometimes it states the obvious, especially to people in the know, but sometimes people are sat there going, what are they talking about? So, of course, Screen Actors Guild, which of course is a
Correct.
big union, and obviously they make lots of rules and regulations. And as you said, that's what's happening on this occasion. How excited are you for this project?
Oh man, you have no idea. I basically sleep it. I breathe the air. I feel the energy. The energy is just way up here right now. I mean, I know this particular recording might not get it to the viewers until sometime 17th or 18th of October. But by that time, you are hearing my voice. We would have already filmed maybe 1 or 2 film dates because we're filming on the 11th of October and we're filming on the 18th. The 18th, we're going to be in Pennsylvania filming a scene. So by then, I've already would be on day 2, day 3 of filming. So I'm just so pumped right now.
There is a call for extras, etc. Because, like you said, even by the time that this comes out, you will have done a few filming days, but I believe you will possibly still need some extras. So, how do
Right.
people get involved in this? And
Yeah.
what's the best way for them to contact you?
So right now, November 1st, Putnam, Connecticut location, they can email me, jhawk@thehawkstudios.com. And we're looking for a few. The support from the town has been overwhelming. I mean, we're getting people left and right. And that seemed kind of a 2-part scene. We need extras on the downtown, the streets end. And then we're actually going to be in the Bradley Playhouse inside the theater showing a clip that we already filmed in the theater. So the actors are watching a clip from another clip we filmed. They're watching. And inside that, we need some theater bystanders in there, if you will. And then also on the November 16th in Farmington, Connecticut, inside the library, we'll need some background people. So depending on where the listeners are or where they work, if they're in that geographical area between either Farmington or November, they can most certainly reach out to me. Also, November 15th, we're kind of down the other way. We're in Norwalk, Connecticut, looking for extras for our simulation scene. So those basically right now are the 3 scenes we need extras for right now.
And certainly for any exterior filming, you'll be hoping the weather doesn't go too crazy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really hopeful. November 1, that's the Putnam scene. Rain, snow, or otherwise, we're going to be filming. So, we welcome the elements. If it happens to be raining, hey, it's raining. We're going to still film. If it's snowing, I hope not, but you never know with Connecticut. The polar eclipse kind of comes early sometimes. But hey, if it's snowing, we're filming. The only thing that we're very cautious is on the October 11th scene. That's when we're going down the sewer, the manhole. That's actually being used as an excess rainfall tunnel. So there's going to be some water down there. I'm just hoping it doesn't rain the day before or during when we're filming, because that might be hard to do. Our OSHA guy is there. We're following OSHA 1910 146 that talks about the confined spaces. We got to test the air before we go down. So my OSHA guy is going to open up the manhole. We're literally in the middle of the street. The cop is going to be there. Imagine just driving by and you see the film crew, people in Army uniforms going down this manhole. That's going to be a talk at the local watering hole, but we're going to be doing that. So I'm hopeful the rain will not interfere with that one, but we welcome the elements. We do.
Not only will you welcome the elements, but I'm sure you'll be welcoming local media as well, because that's not every day, as you say, that you're going to see people popping down a manhole in the middle of the street in Pennsylvania. Joe, it's been great talking to you. We wish you incredible success. It sounds like an absolutely brilliant miniseries, and we can't wait to see the results of that. Hopefully episodes 1 and 2 in the early part of next year. Keep us updated. We will try and keep up with you as well as this develops. But in the meantime, Joe Hawk, filmmaker, writer and director, thanks for being on the podcast.
I really thank you for your time.
And filming for The White House is Fake starts in October and through November here in Connecticut. And if you're interested in being an extra, then you can contact Joe at jhawk, that's the letter J, HAWK, at thehawkstudios.com. And the first 2 episodes of the series should hit our screens in the summer of 2026 on the streaming service Tubi. Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week, supported by ctexaminer.com, reporting and supporting what matters. Early voting in Connecticut for the November general elections starts on October 20th, and this year all 5 state universities have been designated as early voting centers. That includes Eastern, Southern, Western, Central Connecticut, and UConn. Dr. Karim Ismaili is the president of Eastern Connecticut State University, who have joined the other schools for the first time.
We are able to offer our students, our community on our campus, but also the town of Windham an opportunity to come and vote. And for a public institution like Eastern, we want to encourage civic participation. That's one of our core beliefs. And so if we can extend that and make it easier for people, that's perfect for us.
The new initiative was made possible following the passage of Public Act 25168 earlier this year by the Connecticut General Assembly. And Ismaili says his students are looking forward to voting at the school.
Given that we're in the middle of a semester, they're looking for an easy way to vote, some of them for the first time. So this obviously provides them with that pathway to do it. And we'll support them in whatever way we can, because again, what I would say for the university, we believe in civic participation. We believe in being engaged in a democracy. And what better way to do it than on your campus where you're studying?
Eastern has received all appropriate training from the state and has implemented the necessary security measures to keep the voting process secure. Early voting ends on November 2nd, just 2 days before the November 4th general election. For more information about voting in Connecticut, visit myvote.ct.gov. Connecticut is hoping to attract nurses from outside the state without the need to apply for a separate Connecticut-specific license. Effective October 1st, Connecticut joined 43 other states who are part of the Nurse Licensure Compact Agreement. Manisha Jitani is the commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Public Health and explains how the compact works.
By joining a compact license, it can function almost like a driver's license does, which is that you could go from state to state, any state that participates in the compact, and be able to practice nursing in that state. Since October 1st, we've had over 1,700 nurses already apply for the multi-state compact. So there's obviously a lot of interest and uptake already since this went live.
The Nurse Compact joins other healthcare compacts in Connecticut for physical therapy, psychology, and medicine, which allows physicians to become licensed in other member states. Jitani explains what the benefits are for nurses and the state under the compact agreement.
As a state, there are people who potentially could come into Connecticut and practice here by maybe they already have a compact license and they don't need to get a Connecticut license to be able to practice here. So that can provide additional opportunity for us to hire nurses in the state of Connecticut. That gives additional flexibility to nurses who may want to be able to work here, work in another state, maybe live on the border.
The Nurse Compact is currently pending legislative approval in neighbouring New York State, and Massachusetts has passed the compact but are waiting to implement it. The only state currently not considering a nurses' compact is the state of California. Conservation groups in New England warn a rollback of protections for marine mammals could cause irreversible harm to the ocean ecosystem. Catherine Carley from the Public News Service has this report.
Republicans in Congress have proposed deep revisions to the federal Marine Mammal Protection Act, a landmark law credited in the recovery of humpback, gray, and North Atlantic right whales. Gib Brogan with the advocacy organization Oceana says draft legislation would change the definition of harm to these species and lower population goals.
The draft bill proposes a wide range of deep, unnecessary changes that will have significant effects on marine mammals across the country and around the world.
He calls the current law effective and flexible, allowing for dialogue between conservation groups, scientists, and industry. But some fishing groups see the law as antiquated, with regulations that threaten their livelihoods. A congressman from Alaska is proposing the changes. I'm Catherine Carley.
And in the Connecticut Examiner this week, the town of Groton is introducing a new study to help solve its growing housing shortage. Called Meeting in the Middle, Unlocked Housing Opportunities in Groton is a federally funded project with a goal of increasing housing stock to meet the needs of a changing population and projected job growth from electric boat. The town introduced the project to the community at a public meeting recently. The year-long study is funded by a $350,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Defense's Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. The project comes at a time when Groton's existing housing stock no longer meets the needs of the population, which now sits at around 37,700, a decline from 40,000 based on the 2010 US Census. You can read that report by Amy Wu at ctexaminer.com. And more than 900 million gallons of sewage overflowed into the Connecticut River over the past year, a figure that appears alarming but represents only half the volume recorded the previous year. Weather, not engineering, drove the decline. New England is experiencing dry conditions after 2 years of above-average rainfall that strained aging sewer systems and triggered overflows. Infrastructure improvements over the past year may account for some reductions as well. The problem occurs mainly in older urban sewer systems that channel stormwater and sewage through the same pipes. Heavy rain overwhelms the system, forcing untreated sewage through emergency outlets designed to prevent backups in homes and streets that drain into rivers and streams. Read the full story by reporter Francisco Uranga at ctexaminer.com. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.